I know what you're thinking. How can an NBA star, with all his physical training and fame, survive something as impossible as an alien invasion? Well, let me tell you something. My life was turned upside down that day. I woke up like any other player in Los Angeles, getting ready for another workout at the gym. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and suddenly, everything changed. No one could have predicted what was about to happen. I'm James Hartley, an athlete who's faced many adversities in the world of basketball, but nothing prepared me for what I experienced when the skies opened. The first alien ships descended from space, and what seemed like an ordinary day turned into a nightmare. I was in the middle of practice, but the lights in the sky and the roars of those ships changed everything. Chaos engulfed the city, and what was once familiar became strange and threatening. It all started so calmly. I was going about my daily routine, prepared for an important game, unaware that the world around me was about to crumble. It wasn't until the first explosions began to echo and alien ships began to appear that everything became clear. I knew nothing would ever be the same again, that this would be the last time my life as a basketball player would follow its normal rhythm. The life of a hero or a survivor was beginning to take shape, and I had to quickly decide how to act. I was in Los Angeles at the Staples Center when the attacks began. The place I called my professional home was being destroyed before my eyes. Fear gripped each of us there, but something inside me made me make a quick decision. It was no longer about being the best basketball player. It wasn't about winning championships or medals. Now the focus was simply on survival. I knew I was being tested in ways I never imagined I would experience. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover will surprise you. I and other survivors were not only fighting for our lives, but also for our humanity. No one knew what to expect from the aliens, and I was about to discover what it meant to face the unknown in a way I never thought possible. Being in the middle of the alien invasion was the greatest test of my life, and now, I'll tell you how I survived the first 24 hours of this apocalypse. Now, I want to take you deeper into this chaos. How can someone accustomed to facing opponents on the court survive a war against alien forces? What happened when the entire world collapsed? What does it take to survive when everything you know suddenly disappears? Let's find out together, because what follows isn't just a story of overcoming. It's the true struggle for human survival. I know that as you watch this story, you're probably wondering, what would I do in that player's shoes? How would I react to something so unusual, so far outside my comfort zone? I asked myself these questions too, as I tried to understand what was happening. The reality was clear, but at the same time, too absurd to believe. We're talking about an alien invasion, something that seemed far-fetched, a science fiction that turned into a real nightmare. If you've identified with what I've shared so far, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. How would you react if you were in my shoes, faced with a threat that can't be combated with what we know? Leave your comment here and tell me, what would make you fight to survive in a world invaded by aliens? Your opinion is very important to me and to the entire community that's forming here. Your participation helps this channel grow, reaching more people and creating a network of people who share this journey. And if you're enjoying the story and want to see more about this survival journey, don't forget to leave a like. It helps me know I'm on the right track, bringing you content that connects and impacts you. It's with this feedback that I can continue producing more videos like this, exploring the struggle for human survival and the lessons that emerge when we face the impossible. Oh, and of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't waste any time. Subscribing will ensure you don't miss the next episodes of this intense and twist-filled journey. Together, we'll explore the depths of human survival in the face of unimaginable challenges. Comment below. I'm with you until the end, if you're ready to continue following this story that's barely begun. It was just another ordinary day, like any other. I got up early at 7 a.m., as I always do. The fresh Los Angeles morning air gave me that energy only the city can offer. The sun was shining through the window, the city still quiet, with the characteristic sounds of a new day beginning. I was ready for an intense workout, another day dedicated to improving my skills, preparing for the next game. My focus was total. The gym was silent, only the sound of my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The radio was playing a mix of news about the weather in Alaska, some updates on the rival team's opponents, and the occasional NBA gossip. Nothing special, just business as usual. But I was completely focused on preparing for the challenge ahead. Training would be demanding, but no more so than usual. I knew the upcoming games would be decisive, and like any dedicated athlete, I was ready to give it my all. For me, basketball was my life, and this felt like just another day at work. I never imagined that, at that moment, the world I lived in was about to turn upside down. I was, as always, focused on my routine. It was a normal morning of practice, dressed in my Los Angeles Lakers uniform, preparing for the upcoming season, unaware that my priorities would radically change. Now that you know a little about my routine, the question arises, what would have happened if everything had followed the normal course that day? I would never know. What I know now is that what happened on that fateful day not only changed my life, but also the course of everyone around me. Until that moment, nothing in my world indicated that I was about to be hit by a storm that not even the most powerful opponent on the court could have imagined. Those first hours of the alien invasion taught me how unexpected and unpredictable the future can be. I was so engrossed in my training that I didn't even realize what was happening. I didn't understand what was happening to the weather. The city, my city, was about to be destroyed, and I didn't even realize it. But as events began to unfold, I knew my routine was about to be completely disrupted. The alien invasion began without warning, and by the time I realized it, it was too late. What lay ahead wasn't about basketball, wasn't about opponents, but about survival. Now, the game I was about to play would be far more difficult than any championship I'd ever played. What would you do if you were in my shoes? How would you react if, on a normal morning, your world changed so drastically? I never imagined my life could take such a turn, and I know no one is prepared for what happened. But if you're here, it's because you want to know how I survived and what happened next. Stay with me until the end and see how every second of this fight for survival shaped my hero's journey. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. The transformation I experienced was immense. It made me understand the true nature of survival and solidarity. What follows is not just a story of how to fight aliens, but how to face the unknown, what lies beyond our comfort zone. It was around 2 p.m. when I began to notice something that didn't make sense. The sky, which would normally be clear, was changing. The clouds were moving strangely, much faster than usual, forming swirls on the horizon. At first I tried to ignore it. After all, everyone knows the weather can be unpredictable, especially in Los Angeles. But the feeling was there, in the back of my mind, like a feeling that something wasn't right. Something told me this wasn't a normal phenomenon. I was in the middle of an intense practice, mentally preparing for the game, when the radio started to fail. That, for me, was the first sign that something truly strange was happening. I tried calling the news center to see if there was an alert, but the lines were cut. At that moment, the pressure in the air seemed to increase, a strange sensation that made my heart beat faster. Each breath seemed heavier, and the uneasiness grew. The silence was interrupted by a boom from the sky, something so loud it made even the ground vibrate beneath my feet. I never imagined it would be the beginning of something so big. I looked out the gym window, and that's when I saw it. Alien ships began to appear in the sky. It was as if time had stopped for a second, as if the entire world were caught in an imminent suspense. It didn't seem real. The sky was now filled with immense ships, with shapes unlike anything I'd ever seen in my life. I was paralyzed, unsure if what I was seeing was a figment of my imagination, or if it was really happening. I tried to activate the emergency system, but communication was compromised. What had once seemed like a peaceful training routine was now becoming a fight for survival. The ships weren't there by chance, and I soon realized something much bigger was about to happen. Fear gripped my body, but adrenaline surged as well. There was no more time for doubt or hesitation. Everything around me was about to change, and I would have to make quick decisions if I wanted to save my life and the lives of everyone around me. As I watched those approaching ships, I thought of my coach's words before every big game. Preparation is the key to success. But this wasn't about basketball. There were no more opponents on the court, no more points to be scored. Survival had become the most important game of my life. I turned away from the window and for a moment found myself trying to rationalize what was happening. Was this a mistake? Was I seeing things? But then the rumble came again, louder, and reality began to set in. I wasn't just playing a game anymore. I was on the battlefield, and I didn't know what to do. What happens when someone who has spent their entire life preparing for one kind of battle finds themselves facing something completely beyond their comprehension? How can an athlete's lifelong training prepare you for an apocalyptic situation? How can an NBA star react when the reality he knew crumbles before his eyes? Let's continue exploring what happened on that fateful day and how fear, courage, and determination transformed into a journey of survival. The sky opened up. The boom was so loud it shook the gymnasium windows as if an earthquake had struck the ground. It was like a dull rumble, echoing and reverberating throughout the city, accompanied by a series of rapidly spreading explosions. What had seemed like a simple basketball practice, a familiar routine, suddenly turned into a nightmare. I stepped away from the court and went to the window, trying to understand what was happening. That's when I saw it. Huge alien ships hovering over the city, their lights shining in the sky, making the atmosphere even more apocalyptic. At first, no one knew what to do. The coaches and players exchanged glances, unsure of what was happening. Some thought it was some kind of military exercise or even a fireworks display. But I knew better. What was happening there was real. The city was being invaded. The air was heavy, charged with a strange energy I'd never felt before. The sound of explosions continued, growing more intense, while alien ships hovered in the sky as if observing the city. My mind immediately went into survival mode. I knew this wasn't a passing event. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't part of a movie. Panic began to spread among the players and coaching staff. People, initially stunned, began to move, seeking shelter, but no one knew where to go. The streets of Los Angeles, which moments before had been teeming with life and movement, were now empty, a scene of terror taking shape. Screams began to be heard in the distance, coming from the street. Some ran in all directions, others stood frozen, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. I could feel my heart pounding, faster than ever. What was happening? How could someone, an NBA star, be preparing for what was to come? In that moment, all the medals and titles I'd won on the court lost their meaning. It wasn't about being the best player. It wasn't about what I could do with the basketball. It was about survival. And the only thing I knew was that I had to get out of there. Panic gripped everyone in the room. There was no longer any control. The walls, which had once reflected images of our professional lives, were now merely a backdrop for the chaos that was unfolding throughout the place. I knew I wouldn't have much time before they began, descending and took complete control. What I felt in those moments wasn't just fear, but an immense sense of urgency. With each passing second, the ships drew closer, and destruction seemed inevitable. I looked at the players and staff and saw that many were starting to panic as well. There were no more safety protocols. There was no longer a match to be played. The only goal now was survival. I didn't know which would be more dangerous, the alien ships or the horde of desperate people trying to escape the impending doom. But deep down, I knew that running wouldn't be enough. They were hunting us. The question was no longer whether you were a good player or a great athlete. The question was who could resist this extraterrestrial force that was coming and forever changing what we understand as reality. At that moment, I didn't know what to expect. The explosions were getting closer, and the ground shook beneath our feet. More and more ships appeared on the horizon, and as they approached, the tension only increased. It was as if the world as we knew it was crumbling before our eyes. Buildings began to crumble, the sound of breaking metal filling the air. I looked to the horizon and saw a massive alien ship hovering above the city, a technological monster that seemed more of a direct threat than something that could be controlled. I knew this was a battle without rules. The game was on hold, and what lay ahead was a fight for our very existence. The sound of another crash interrupted the silence of my thoughts, and then I realized they were descending. There was no longer any doubt. The ships were not just observers, but hunters, and we were their target. There was no longer any escape from them, and all that remained was to face the unknown with the only weapon I had, the will to survive. Because as chaos spread through the streets of Los Angeles, something inside me awakened. As someone who had always been accustomed to being the best at what I did, I now had to adapt to a game where survival was the only objective. How, then, could an NBA star use what he learned on the court to face the greatest threat that ever existed? Let's explore the mindset that forms when everything around you turns to chaos. The situation was becoming increasingly untenable, and the pressure was mounting by the minute. I knew I needed to make a decision, and fast. Flee or fight. I looked around. Chaos was spreading through the streets, and the sound of explosions was getting closer. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel my adrenaline rising, but at the same time, there was a sense of paralysis. Fleeing meant abandoning everything, leaving behind my life, my career, my city. But fighting was nearly impossible. They weren't like any enemy I'd ever faced. What we were facing wasn't a rival basketball team or a fierce opponent. They were aliens, and the fight felt unequal. I grabbed my cell phone trying to call my family, but the lines began to drop one by one. The signal was unstable, calls weren't going through, and every second that passed pushed me further away from the possibility of reporting anything. That's when I realized what was happening wasn't a local incident. It was global, a worldwide threat that wasn't confined to Los Angeles or the United States. The invasion was on a global scale. I knew I wasn't alone in this nightmare, but at the same time, the weight of this realization only gave me more urgency. Every second of hesitation meant one less chance of survival. I needed to get out of the city, and fast. The road was blocked, and the aliens were hunting anyone in sight. I was forced to make a decision without time to overthink. Flee or fight? The choice wasn't simple. Fleeing meant immense risk. The roads were filled with panic and desperation, with cars stopping and turning back, as if there were no escape. What I knew was that if I didn't act now, I'd never have another chance to escape. It was the race for survival that motivated me, something I'd never experienced before, not even in the most tense moments on a basketball court. There, the risk wasn't just losing the game, the risk was losing my life. Adrenaline was coursing through every cell in my body, and while I was still trying to process everything that was happening, my survival instinct was telling me to go. I finally decided that escape was the only option. The situation around me was rapidly deteriorating. There was no more time to analyze the situation. Decisions had to be made in the heat of the moment. I took a deep breath and started driving, but soon realized that the situation on the road was nothing more than a reflection of the chaos that was engulfing the city. Traffic was at a standstill, and every attempt to move forward was a risk. What had seemed like a simple escape soon turned into a battlefield. There was no longer any safety. I could trust nothing, but I knew the fight for survival was just beginning. Panic was already gripping the streets, and alien ships still hovered overhead, as if watching every move. What I saw in that moment made me question everything. How could one possibly survive something so powerful, so beyond the reach of human reason? The journey of survival wasn't just about running. It was about knowing where to go, how to act, and above all, remaining calm. I knew the worst was yet to come. There was no turning back. The game now was no longer about what was happening on the court. It was about finding refuge and protecting those around me. As I tried to find a safe route, what occurred to me was how crucial the mindset of those accustomed to dealing with pressure can be in moments like these. Fight or flight. The response we make in the heat of the moment determines everything. And again, adrenaline was what helped me make the right decision. Running away wouldn't be the final answer. It was a temporary strategy, but what would follow would require more than mere instinct. In the next few minutes, it wouldn't just be physical survival that was at stake. It was our mental strength that would truly make the difference. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the next part of this story is the one that truly reveals how quick decisions and a survivor's mentality can determine who lives and who perishes in a situation like this. The pressure doesn't ease, it only increases, and with each passing second, the danger becomes more real. The fight for survival isn't just physical, it's emotional, mental, and, above all, a test of human endurance. Chaos was spreading as quickly as the explosions echoing in the distance, and as I made my way through the streets, my mind was consumed with the need to survive. Every second was a battle. What had once been a bustling city was now a war zone, a desolate wasteland where only the strongest and fastest would have a chance of escape. But amidst all this despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. I was driving down one of Los Angeles's back streets, trying to escape the growing chaos, when I saw a figure in the middle of the road. It was a man and a woman, both with faces drawn by panic, but with clear determination in their eyes. Beside them was a small girl, who, despite the fear etched on her face, still tried to maintain her composure. My first reaction was distrust. My instinct was that no one could be trusted at that moment, but something inside me, primal force, made me stop. Who else could survive alone? There was no more time for distrust. Solidarity was now our only chance. They were in a situation as desperate as mine. I knew it. The landscape around us already showed that the future was uncertain, but there was still a chance. We looked at each other without saying a word, but everything became clear. We couldn't go on alone. Something inside me knew that our only chance of survival was to form an alliance. Humanity couldn't stand alone, and at that moment, our fates were intertwined in a way that not even the alien invasion could undo. Our first exchange was simple. I need help. You too? The woman, her eyes brimming with tears, simply nodded. The man, quieter, held his daughter tightly, as if trying to maintain control of a situation completely beyond his reach. I knew the fight was now not just mine, but ours. Whatever was happening, the alien threat gave us no other option. We needed to join forces. We formed a silent pact in that moment, in the middle of the deserted street, surrounded by alien ships hovering above us, their oppressive presence becoming increasingly evident. If we didn't fight together, if we didn't form a team, we wouldn't stand a chance. The fear we shared connected us in a way words couldn't explain. Each of us had a different skill set, a unique experience to contribute, and in that moment, that became essential. I, an NBA star, knew how to think quickly, how to move with precision under pressure, but I was no longer on a basketball court. I was on the front lines of a battle for survival. We had no time for anything else. The world outside was falling apart, and our lives were just a fraction of the chaos. Reality was rapidly changing. Civilization as we knew it was crumbling before our eyes. Now, we were just human beings trying to escape imminent destruction. The only way to achieve this was through unity, and it was with this understanding that we forged ahead, doing whatever it took to move forward. Solidarity was the key to overcoming that moment. We could no longer rely on security systems. We could no longer trust what had once been our protection. Everything was crumbling. What I learned at that moment was that the strength of the collective can be far more powerful than any individual ability, no matter how extraordinary. If you can't fight alone, the only way out is to join forces. And that's what we did. Our first step was to find a safe haven, a place where we could try to understand what was happening and how to confront the aliens hunting us. We didn't know where to begin, but we knew that together, we would be stronger. We headed to an abandoned warehouse that seemed like the safest place to hide for a while. We couldn't trust anyone, but we needed that togetherness. And while the rest of the city was consumed by chaos, we had to make our own way, based on what our instincts told us. Because as unity became our greatest strength, something else was happening. I realized that survival wasn't just about fight or flight. It was about making quick decisions, about trusting instincts that previously seemed irrelevant. What awaited us in the next few hours was uncertain, but what I knew was that our collective mindset could be what saved us from total destruction. The challenge of survival wouldn't just be physical, but mental as well. We huddled in that abandoned garage, believing for a brief moment that we had found a safe place, but the feeling of dread wouldn't leave us alone. I could feel my heart pounding, the sound of my breathing growing more labored by the second. The feeling that nothing would ever be the same again was so strong it seemed to envelop us like a cloak of darkness. We were in total uncertainty, with the rusted garage doors and those shadows of alien ships hovering outside, unsure of how to react. What could be worse than this? The answer was about to arrive. We had little time, and the silence that hung over the room was about to be shattered by something far more terrifying. They had arrived. It was no longer a distant idea. They weren't just monsters with sharp teeth and deadly claws. They were more than that. They were humanoids, with greenish skin, deep black eyes, and a presence that seemed to swallow light itself. There was no denying it. We were facing creatures from another world, and the only thing I knew was that we couldn't wait any longer. They were hunting, and if we didn't act immediately, survival would be just a distant dream. Fear began to take hold of me, something I had never experienced before. It wasn't the fear I feel during a decisive match, nor the fear of what might happen in a tournament. It was something real, something I never imagined I would face. My mind was consumed with tension, but deep down, something stronger emerged. The will to survive drove me, made me think faster. I knew there was no escape, nowhere to run. My only chance of staying alive was to face that threat head-on. What did I have at my disposal? Nothing but a piece of metal from my truck, a makeshift weapon. My muscles were tense, sweat dripping down my forehead, but my mind was clear. I needed to act. An alien approached, and I braced myself for the confrontation. The fear was still there, of course, but now it was just fuel for the adrenaline coursing through my body. As the alien advanced, preparing me to strike first, Something inside me ignited. I was ready, not to give up, not to be hunted like an animal. I was ready to fight. The battle began, and everything seemed a blur of movement and tension. I hit the alien with the piece of metal, and it reacted with a speed I hadn't expected. But my determination was greater. I knew that life as I knew it had already faded, and all that remained was to fight with all my might to ensure there would still be a tomorrow. The fight wasn't easy, and the feeling of being alone, fighting against something unimaginable, only increased the pressure. Every blow, every movement, every breath felt like my last. But deep down, the only thing that mattered was survival. When that alien fell, I knew I had only bought a little time. There were many of them, and what I saw in that moment was only a fraction of the threat that was taking over the world. The chaos was no longer in Los Angeles. It was spreading across the entire planet, swallowing everything in its path. The fear of being captured and destroyed was present, but the resistance was even more alive within me. This would not be my story of the end, of being defeated. I had survived that first encounter, but I knew the worst was yet to come. The silence that followed was heavy, more intense than any other moment. I stood, looked at the other survivors, and saw the same internal struggle reflected in their eyes. We were no longer basketball players, no longer victims of fear. We were fighters. Each of us now had a single goal: to survive. Every decision we made, every step we took, could be our last. There was no longer any certainty, only the stark reality that the world around us was being destroyed. Because the real journey began there, at that moment. I survived the first confrontation with the aliens. But what was truly at stake wasn't just the physical struggle. What was revealed with each passing minute was the psychological impact, the challenge of mental survival. What followed this encounter changed my understanding of being human. How could solidarity, courage, and the will to fight carry us through this nightmare? Let's explore what it truly means to face the impossible and what it takes to overcome the destruction of an entire world. The fight for survival wasn't easy. Every step we took was a choice that could mean life or death. I knew that running away was no longer an option. Time became an invisible enemy, and the more I tried to understand what was happening, the more my options closed. There was no more room for fear, no more room for hesitation. Now, all that mattered was action. The aliens were everywhere, not just in the sky. They were in the streets, hunting anyone who moved. The psychological pressure was consuming me. My mind, once accustomed to making quick decisions on the basketball court, was now consumed by uncertainty. Every noise I heard, every movement around me, made me believe it was the last breath I would take. Fear was present, but I couldn't allow myself to succumb to it. My survival instinct took over, pushing me to do whatever it took to avoid becoming another victim of the chaos. We had no resources, nothing. What we found along the way was what we had to protect ourselves. I no longer held a basketball, no longer stood on a sports court. Now all I had was a hunk of metal and a will to survive that grew ever more intense. With each distant explosion, each alien ship passing through the sky, the landscape around me became more hostile, more immersive, more real. It all felt like a nightmare of unimaginable proportions, but what I knew was that I couldn't let fear stop me. Our first reaction was to hide, trying to find a place where the aliens couldn't reach us. But I soon realized that hiding wouldn't protect us for long. They were hunting us, and their technology was far more advanced than anything I'd ever experienced. We didn't have sophisticated weapons like theirs. What we were left with was what I'd call a true game of improvisation. We used anything we could find, from scraps of metal to improvised shields. Every step, every movement had to be calculated. There was no room for error. The other survivors and I needed to use our skills and knowledge to strategize quickly. Like a basketball game, the difference between success and failure lay in split-second decisions. We couldn't afford to hesitate. Every mistake would be fatal. My body was tired. Mental fatigue hit me with every step, but the will to stay alive gave me the strength to keep going. I didn't know how long this would last, but I knew I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. The impact of my quick decisions became clear. The mental pressure was testing me at every turn. The aliens were closer now, and every time an alien ship flew overhead, my heart beat faster. I knew the instincts I'd honed throughout my basketball career would now be put to the test in a completely different way. It was a situation where every move, every hiding spot, every step I took could be fatal. But even so, with the pressure mounting, with fear spreading through my mind, I knew that if I didn't act immediately, The consequences would be irreversible. I saw people around me beginning to lose control, fear beginning to dominate their actions. But there was something inside me that wouldn't let me give up. I couldn't be defeated. The desire to overcome the impossible, to fight with all my might, was stronger than any fear or doubt I might feel. Survival wasn't a matter of luck, but of mindset and action. And if I wanted to get out of there alive, I needed to keep acting, keep fighting, and keep moving forward, no matter how much the world around me was crumbling. Amidst the chaos, the simplest moments became the most important. The exchange of glances with other survivors, the silent gesture of support from someone who, like me, was struggling to avoid succumbing to destruction. These were the moments that kept me going. Solidarity wasn't just a word now. It was the key to our survival. Uniting was the only way to avoid being completely consumed by the chaos. We knew that if one of us fell, we all would. We couldn't afford to fail. As the alien ships descended, each second felt like an eternity. The sounds of explosions echoed throughout the city, and the screams of panic seemed never-ending. But there was a feeling inside me that refused to abandon me. I still had hope, still knew this wouldn't be the end. I knew that with the right decision, anything was possible. The true willpower that reveals itself in moments of extreme danger comes not from powerful skills or weapons, but from the mental resolve to move forward. The fight wasn't just about what was happening around me, but about the inner strength each of us possessed to face the impossible. That's what separates us from victims or victors. And as I've seen with other survivors, when the pressure mounts, only the strongest of mind remain. How do you react when everything around you crumbles? After everything that had happened, I knew the journey was just beginning. The fear, the adrenaline, the chaos gripping the planet, none of it was over. The alien ship still hovered in the sky, as imposing and menacing as the first moment we saw them. The danger never left, and as the streets of Los Angeles became a battlefield, as the screams of despair echoed through the air, I knew our fight was far from over. What was beginning now was no longer a simple attempt to survive the first hours of the alien invasion. No, what I was experiencing was a permanent change in the course of our history, in our very future. I was no longer an NBA star, no longer in the spotlight, no longer on a basketball court. I no longer had a crowd chanting my name, nor the hope of winning a game. What I was now was a survivor, a man trying to fight, trying to understand what was left of our humanity, trying to understand what was still worth fighting for after having been confronted with something so colossal, something so inexplicable. The reality that we had been invaded by beings from another planet was already taking hold of me, and with each step I took, I realized that more and more people around me were also beginning to understand that life, as we knew it, had come to an end. What will happen next? What will we as human beings do to resist? What can humanity expect from a world suddenly attacked by forces we cannot comprehend, much less combat? I didn't know the answers, but what I'd seen so far was enough to convince me of one thing. Our fight had only just begun. We were no longer simply facing an alien invasion. We were facing a brutal transformation of everything we believed in. What once seemed like a promising future, with victories and achievements for us all, now seemed like a distant echo, a vestige of a world that no longer existed. There was a feeling in the air, something difficult to describe, but which everyone seemed to sense. It was as if time had slowed down, as if all our choices, all our decisions, now carried much greater weight. Reality had become distorted. I was no longer playing basketball. Now I was playing the most important game of my life, and no one knew what would happen next. It was a fight without rules, a fight where any move, any mistake, could mean the end. The future was a thin line between hope and destruction. I was in the midst of an unprecedented war, and the worst part was that the enemies weren't just alien ships or creatures from another planet. The true enemy, deep down, was within me, within all of us. As human beings, as a society, as a civilization, our greatest battle would be against our own mindset. Would we be able to adapt to this new reality, or would we fall into desolation? Would we have the courage to continue facing what was to come, or would we surrender to chaos? The answer wasn't just in my hands. I was no longer just a basketball player. I was, like everyone else around me, an essential piece in a giant puzzle that no one could put together. The choices we made now would shape our destiny, and with each step, we moved closer to the hidden truth that awaited us. It was no longer about simply surviving, but about understanding how to face the unknown, how to overcome our own fears and limitations. I didn't know what awaited us, but one thing was certain: I wasn't alone. There were others around me, people who, like me, were trying to understand what it meant to survive, what it meant to maintain humanity when it seemed about to shatter. But something inside me, something deep, told me that if we don't give up, if we fight together, if we can see beyond the chaos, there is a chance not just to survive, but to build something new, something better, even if the odds are stacked against us. Because the mindset of a true survivor isn't just about what we can do to stay alive, it's about what we can build even when everything around us is crumbling. What does it truly mean to be alive after such immense destruction? How can we, amidst so much pain and loss, find the strength to move forward? And how can we, from such a desperate situation, redefine our journey and see a new opportunity for life? Comment below. I'm on this journey too. I want to hear your thoughts on how, together, we can transform this chaos into a new story of overcoming. And if you've made it this far, it means this story touched you in some way. I truly hope you're as committed to this journey as I am. What do you think humanity will do now? Will we find a way to overcome this invasion, or are we on the brink of total destruction? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know how you see this scenario, what you would do if you were in my shoes. If you enjoyed the content and connected with what I shared, don't forget to give it a like. It's the best way to show you're with me on this journey. Your support is what makes this channel grow and bring you more stories like this. Now, there's a video right here that complements everything we've seen so far. Click and stay with me there as we explore even more about what it means to survive a situation like this. See you there. Comment below. I'm with you until the end. I want to know if you're also on this journey of overcoming